All right, so you guys sent us some interesting stuff for this deep dive. It looks like we're going deep into the world of pop star Kesha, but not for her music this time.
Yeah, this is a fascinating one. What we're looking at here is how Kesha uses words, and, she's someone known for catchy tunes and bold statements, to say the least.
Yeah, she definitely doesn't hold back. So we're not dissecting her latest hit then.
No, no, not this time. This is about the mechanics of language and how powerful figures use it to their advantage.
Okay, so we're talking about things like her saying she brushes her teeth with Jack Daniels,
hmm
or that whole thing about her having a supernatural IQ or something like that.
Exactly. Those are perfect examples. And it's not about whether those things are true or not. The source material isn't praising everything Keisha has said or done. It's really highlighting how she uses words to get people talking and to kind of control the narrative, regardless of how those words are initially perceived.
So it's like, love her or hate her, she knows how to grab attention. The material calls this being a puppet master with words. So, what exactly does that mean?
Well, it's a powerful metaphor, isn't it, Puppet Master? It suggests that by mastering language, you can control the narrative, influence perceptions, and even turn expectations completely upside down.
So are we talking about like subliminal messaging or something? Do I need to start wearing glitter and singing about partying to get this puppet master power?
Not necessarily. While a catchy tune and some glitter might help, the source material focuses on the power of breaking free from societal scripts and saying what often goes unspoken.
Okay, so it's about pushing boundaries and challenging norms with your words. Saying the things people are thinking, but maybe too afraid to say out loud, I can see how that could definitely get people's attention.
Right. And the source material specifically points to Keisha's willingness to embrace provocative language, like her infamous ghost comment and that whole IQ of 140 claim.
So she's basically playing the media game,
Yeah.
using outrageous statements to keep people talking about her, whether it's good or bad press.
Exactly. It's about creating a buzz, staying relevant, and ultimately controlling the conversation, at least to some extent.
That's actually pretty clever. So how can we, the non-pop star folks, tap into this power without, claiming to have a ghost in our attic? Give us the practical takeaways here.
Well, the source material offers some concrete examples. It highlights a line where Keisha twists a famous quote, the one, "Time heals all wounds."
Yeah, I know that one.
She changes it up a bit. She says, "They say time heals all wounds. I say it just leaves some damn ugly scars." It takes something familiar, almost a cliche, and subverts it with a touch of darkness and humor.
Yeah, that definitely makes you stop and think. It's unexpected, a bit edgy, and it sticks with you.
Exactly. And that's a technique we can all use. Whether it's writing an email, crafting a presentation, or even just having a conversation, choosing words that surprise and challenge expectations can make your message more memorable and impactful.
So we need to be more deliberate with our word choices, thinking about the impact we want to create. But how do we know when to push the boundaries and when to play it safe? I don't want to accidentally offend someone with my newfound puppet master skills.
It's a balancing act for sure, and that's where the source material's recommendation of Poetry Master comes in. It claims to offer a blueprint for using language strategically, whether for impact persuasion or even disruption.
Right, the book they keep mentioning. Turn your words into earthquakes. Dominate every conversation. It all sounds a bit intense, like, am I going to become some kind of verbal supervillain if I read this thing?
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Hyperbolic marketing aside, the idea of learning from poetry is intriguing. Think about it. Poets are masters of condensing meaning into powerful, evocative language. They use rhythm imagery and wordplay to create emotional impact.
So it's not about writing sonnets and haikus. It's about applying those techniques to make our everyday communication more effective. Like, instead of sending a boring email that gets lost in the inbox, I could use poetic strategies to make it stand out and get noticed.
Exactly. Imagine crafting emails that people actually want to read because they're engaging, thought-provoking, even a little bit beautiful. That's the power of poetic language.
Okay, I'm starting to see the potential here. But let's be real, most of us aren't poets. How do we bridge that gap and actually use these techniques in our daily lives?
That's where understanding the core principles comes in. Poetry Master claims to break down these concepts in a practical way. Whether it lives up to that promise, we can't say for sure. But the idea of borrowing from poetry to enhance our communication skills is worth exploring.
So we should all channel our inner Shakespeare and start speaking in iambic pentameter.
Ah,
I'm not sure my boss would appreciate that during our next meeting.
not quite. It's more about understanding the tools poets use and adapting them to different contexts. For example, think about the power of metaphor. Poets use metaphors to make abstract ideas concrete and relatable. We can do the same in our writing and speaking.
So instead of saying, I'm really stressed about this project, I could say, this project is a giant hairy monster looming over my head. Maybe not that dramatic, but I see your point. Metaphors can paint a vivid picture and make your message more memorable.
Exactly. Or think about the way poets use rhythm and repetition to create emphasis and emotional impact. We can borrow those techniques too. Instead of just listing facts in a presentation, we can use carefully chosen words and sentence structure to build tension, create suspense, and ultimately persuade our audience.
This is starting to feel less like poetry class and more like a master class in persuasion.
Yeah.
Intriguing, but also a little bit scary. I mean, what if these techniques fall into the wrong hands? What if someone uses them to manipulate or deceive others?
That's an important ethical consideration. Like any tool, language can be used for good or for bad. The source material acknowledges this, emphasizing that understanding the power of words comes with the responsibility to use them ethically and thoughtfully.
So it's not just about being clever with words. It's about being aware of the impact those words can have. It's like that the Spider-Man quote, with great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly. This deep dive is as much about raising awareness as it is about providing practical tips. It's a reminder that our words have weight, they have meaning, and they can shape the world around us. We need to be conscious of that power and use it wisely.
Okay, I'm starting to feel a bit overwhelmed here.
Yeah.
It's like you're saying that every email, every text message, every conversation is a potential masterpiece or a potential disaster, depending on how we use our words.
It's not about stressing over every single word, but about developing an awareness of how language works and how we can use it more effectively. It's a skill like anything else that takes practice and refinement.
So should we all enroll in poetry school now, or is there a more practical way to start incorporating these ideas into our lives?
Poetry Master might be one resource, though we can't endorse it without a closer look. But there are other ways to learn and practice. Start paying attention to the language you encounter every day. Notice how writers and speakers use words to persuade, inspire, or entertain. Try experimenting with your own communication. Play with metaphors, rhythm, and vivid imagery.
So it's about becoming more mindful of our language choices and then experimenting to see what works. Kind of like a scientist in a word lab. I can get behind that.
That's the spirit. And who knows, maybe we'll all discover a hidden talent for wielding words in powerful and unexpected ways.
Okay, I'm ready to unleash my inner wordsmith. But before I start composing sonnets to my boss and writing haiku-filled emails, let's take a closer look at this Poetry Master book. Is it really the key to unlocking our linguistic superpowers?
Yeah, it claims that Poetry Master can teach us to turn our words into earthquakes and dominate every conversation. Like I said, a bit intense.
Yeah, a bit much, don't you think? Like, is there really some magic formula, a set of techniques that can instantly transform anyone into like a charismatic, super persuasive communicator?
Well, no magic formula, but there are definitely principles and techniques that can help us become more effective communicators. Whether Poetry Master delivers on its promises is something we can't really say for sure without looking at it ourselves.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. But even if this specific book isn't the holy grail of communication, this whole deep dive has made me way more aware of the power of language. It's like I've been totally sleepwalking through my conversations, emails, presentations, not realizing how much impact my words could actually have.
I think that's a great way to put it. The source material, regardless of its agenda,
Yeah.
trying to promote this book, has really served as a catalyst for a broader conversation about the power of language and how we use it.
It's like they're saying, hey, wake up. Your words have power. Use them wisely. So what's next? Do we all need to become poets to harness this power? Or are there some more practical takeaways we can apply to our everyday lives?
I think a more nuanced approach is better. It's not about becoming a poet, but adopting a more mindful and deliberate approach to using language. We can start by paying closer attention to the language we encounter every day. Notice how writers and speakers use words to persuade, to inspire, to evoke emotion. Then try it out. Experiment with your own communication.
So it's about observation and experimentation. Kind of like becoming a word scientist. Analyzing how language works and then testing those techniques out in our own writing and speaking.
Exactly. Start playing around with metaphors, rhythm, and vivid imagery. See how those techniques can make your emails more engaging, your presentations more persuasive, and your conversations more memorable.
It's actually kind of exciting to think about all the possibilities, but it's also a bit scary. What if we misuse this power? What if our words accidentally hurt or offend someone?
That's a really important point to remember. With great power comes great responsibility. It's crucial to remember that as we become more aware of the power of language, we need to use it ethically and thoughtfully.
So it's not just about being clever or persuasive. It's about being mindful of the impact our words can have on others.
Precisely. This deep dive has been about more than just providing tips and tricks. It's about encouraging a deeper understanding of the power and responsibility that comes with using language.
Well said. So where do we go from here? Do we all rush out and buy Poetry Master, or is there a more organic way to develop our linguistic superpowers?
I think the most important thing to take away from all of this is to start paying attention to the language around you. Notice how it's used, how it makes you feel, and how it influences your thoughts and actions. Then start experimenting with your own language. Play with it, have fun with it, and see what happens. You might be surprised by what you discover.
That's great advice. So instead of feeling overwhelmed by this whole puppet master concept, we could approach it with a sense of curiosity and playfulness. I like that.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to try new things to push the boundaries of your language and to see what kind of impact you can create.
So we've been talking about Kesha and puppet masters and even stealing from poetry to spice our emails, but
Yeah.
let's get back to this Poetry Master book that keeps coming up. Is it really the secret weapon for, leveling up our communication skills?
Yeah. Well, the source material definitely wants you to think so. It claims that Poetry Master can teach us to, turn our words into earthquakes and dominate every conversation. Pretty bold claims.
Yeah, it almost sounds too good to be true. Is there actually a set of techniques that can transform anyone into a super charismatic, persuasive communicator just like that?
Well, I don't think there's a magic formula, but there are definitely principles and techniques that can help us all become better communicators. Whether this book delivers on those promises is something we'd have to see for ourselves.
Yeah, true. But, even if this specific book isn't the be-all, end-all of communication, this whole deep dive has really made me think about how powerful language can be. It's like I've been going through life totally oblivious to how much of an impact my words could have.
I think that's a really great insight. The source material, despite, its agenda promoting this book, has really sparked a bigger conversation about the power of language and the responsibility we have to use it well.
It's like a wake-up call, right? Hey, your words have power. Use them wisely. So what now? What's the next step? Do we all need to go out and become poets to harness this power? Or are there some more down-to-earth things we can do in our everyday lives?
I think the best approach is somewhere in between. It's not really about becoming a poet, but about becoming more mindful and deliberate with how you use language. We can start by paying more attention to the language we encounter every day. Notice how writers and speakers use words to persuade, inspire, or make you feel something. Then you can try it out. Experiment with your own communication.
So it's kind of like becoming a scientist, right? Observing and experimenting with words.
Exactly. And you can start by playing around with metaphors, rhythm, vivid imagery. See what you can do to make your emails more engaging, your presentations more persuasive, your conversations just more interesting.
I like that. But it's also a little intimidating, right? What if we mess it up? What if our words accidentally hurt or offend someone?
It's true. We have to remember that the more powerful something is, the more careful we have to be with it. As we become more aware of the power of language, we need to use it ethically and thoughtfully.
So it's not just about sounding smart or getting what you want. It's about understanding that our words can have a real impact on people.
Exactly. This deep dive has been about more than just giving people tips and tricks. It's about encouraging a deeper understanding of the power and responsibility that comes with using language well.
I like that. So where do we go from here? Should we all run out and buy Poetry Master? Or is there a more natural way to level up our communication skills?
The most important thing to remember is to pay attention to the language around you. Notice how it's being used, how it makes you feel, and how it affects you. Then start experimenting with your own language. Play with it, have fun, and see what happens. You might be surprised at what you're capable of.
That's great advice. So instead of feeling overwhelmed by this whole puppet master idea, we can approach it with curiosity and playfulness.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to try new things, to push the boundaries a little and see what kind of impact you can create with your words.
I love that I'm feeling super inspired to unleash my inner wordsmith.
Yeah.
So what story will you tell with your words, and what kind of impact do you want to make on the world? The author Stefan recommends checking out a book called Poetry Master. You can find a link to it in the show notes. Think about it, and until next time, may your words be ever eloquent and your impact ever positive. Ciao.